I believe that everybody has a story, and I'm fascinated to hear them. So come with me as we take a walk down Fascination Street. This episode is brought to you by patreon.com/Seth Harwood. This is Seth Harwood's new project, and I am a supporter, and I hope you will be too. Again, that's Patreon, patreon.com/Seth Harwood. Last week, we had Billy Smith Part 1, and next week, we'll have Billy Smith Part 2. But for right now, this is a bonus podcast. This is me and my good buddy Alex Hernandez from the Finding Stacks podcast. We're interviewing one of my all-time favorite authors, Seth Harwood. He tells us about the new project he's working on and some of the research he did to write this book. Enjoy, guys.
Yeah, talk to me, yeah.
So how's it going, Seth? Well, tell everybody who are you?
Who you be? I'm a writer from Massachusetts. I would like to associate with Cambridge, Massachusetts, although now I live out near Northampton in the middle of the state. I was in San Francisco for a long time, and I'm the writer of Jack Wakes Up, Jack Palm's stories, the stories of In Broad Daylight, A Long Way from Disney, Fisher Cat, and other stories, As Much Protein as an Egg, and I've long been associated with online outreach to my readers through audio that I record myself, and Steve is one of the most awesome fans any writer could ever have.
Thank you, but you left out Young Junius.
That's true. I left out Young Junius. Oh my God, I have crazy stories to tell you about Young Junius today.
Please, yeah, let's hear it. Well, Young Junius was a character that was in Junius Pons. Was that his name, right?
Of course.
And he was a character in Jack Wakes Up, and he was such a popular character that you wrote a whole nother novel just about him.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that book. He was in his 30s as a drug dealer in San Francisco in the first book, and then I ended up writing a short story that had him in it that took place in the late 80s in Cambridge, which was sort of in the area where I was growing up back then in the late 80s in Cambridge, Massachusetts, on the mean streets of Cambridge, Massachusetts. And
I was like, Main Street.
see, you guys are laughing, and I seriously caught many rations of shit for saying the mean streets of Cambridge, and a lot of people were certainly incredulous about this. But just this week, the real people of the mean streets of Cambridge, North Cambridge, where these project towers are that I wrote about in Young Junius, have all of a sudden been contacting me. The kids who grew up in those projects when I was growing up a few miles away have had a big reunion for some reason this week, this summer, and they all got together, and some of them somehow knew about my book and they were talking about it at this reunion. So this week I've been hearing from them and getting messages from them from several of them on Facebook and YouTube and places where they're finding me. And today I found out this woman who contacted me, her husband produces hip hop music from Cambridge, and he has worked with these other guys who did an album. I'm not exactly sure when this album came out, but the title of the album is Black Auerbach, which I think is one of the greatest things I've heard in a long time for black hip hop guys from Boston to call their album. You guys down in San Antonio don't really know the whole history of the Celtics and Red Auerbach.
Red Auerbach?
Yeah, you guys are on sort of a Greg Popovich forever kind of thing down there. But up here we had this guy, Red Auerbach, who was sort of like genius. He was the guy. And so he was the guy, when I was growing up, he was the guy who engineered the big three of Larry Bird, Robert Parrish, and Kevin McHale. Before that, he did tons of other amazing things with the Celtics. But so I found out about this hip hop album today, and these guys have songs called Gats. It's about guns. In the Bridge, which is really raw, rugged hip hop, talking about the actual main streets of Cambridge. So it's real. I'm here to say it's real. And Young Junius represents that, which for me is sort of writing about something that was certainly a part of my adolescence.
Where did you listen to this album? Where'd you get it from?
It's on SoundCloud. I found out today that I can't buy it for some reason. It's not on iTunes or any of those places, but through the Facebook account of this guy named Iraq Culprit, I found it on SoundCloud, and I think he's called Culprit Records or something like that. But the album is Black Hour Back by K.I. Shit is slamming.
Is it like old school?
It's like old school.
I'll take it.
I don't entirely know what my alternatives are. If this is multiple choice and old school is one of them, I don't know what the alternatives are, but this is like old school. It's not like it was released in, I think, 2001 or something like that. So shortly after the golden age of hip hop.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like Wiz Khalifa. It sounds more like.
Oh God, no! It doesn't sound anything like Wiz Khalifa or Panda or any of that stuff. These are Cambridge guys. It sounds a little like Wu-Tang in some ways.
All right, cool. I'll kick ass. All right, we're on it. So you're a big Boston fan?
Are we going to go the sports direction?
Yeah, whatever. No, I was just trying to say, like, how big of an influence is that part of the country, that city, in writing, in your short story writing and your long form stuff like that? I mean, how much of it? I mean, is that why you venture out to different places like San Francisco or is it northern part of Vermont? So do you just write stories from wherever you live? Because I mean, you wrote San Francisco-based stories. Were you in Alaska? I mean, in broad daylight was in Alaska. When were you there?
I was there for like 10 days in 2011. So basically, I went there. And I was like, oh, I should write. Well, no. So Alaska, like I legitimately went there. It was an awesome trip. I wanted to write something set in Alaska because it was really an astounding place that really affected me. I also wanted to write something set in San Francisco when I arrived there. There's something about when you get to a new place, you see it in a way that's different than you see the place that you grew up. So still, like to some extent, I'm understanding what Boston is in ways that I didn't understand when I was growing up. And I'm not, Young Junius and the short stories are the only things that I wrote in Cambridge, but because of that, they're all sort of close to my heart in a special way. And Young Junius is the novel that's closest to my short stories. But, you know, a couple of years later, I went to Kauai and I started writing this story with Jack Palms in Kauai. And I thought that I was just kind of doing it as a tax write-off so that I could write off this vacation, which is basically how writers exist, is to try and write off everything that they do. Yeah, basically that's how we quote unquote make our money. So I wrote this story that had Jack Palms going to Kauai, and I showed it to my friend who was doing some editing for me, and he's like, this story's great, you have to keep it going. And so this is the story that wound up being the Maltese Jordans, which is what I'm doing now on Patreon, which Steve has received as one of the awesome Patreon, as literally the most awesome Patreon donor, has received the entire manuscript of the Maltese Jordans. And there's like 5 people in the world that have read this, and 2 of them are not related to me. So you're in rare air there. But the thing is, so Maltese Jordans, I love because it really connected to something that's really sort of near and dear to me, which is my long-term and deeply repressed love of basketball sneakers and Michael Jordan era sneakers.
Okay. So I'll stop you right there on the sneaker thing and your love for Jordans. There's this show on Netflix called Abstract.
Huh.
And it's called, they're documentaries. Each episode is a different documentary on a different craft, like someone who does street art, someone who does fabrics or calligraphy and letter writing for signs and stuff throughout New York City, stuff like that. But one of them is about the creator of the Air Jordan.
Tinker Hatfield?
Yeah, it's all about him.
Oh, Tinker Hatfield is a god.
How he saved Nike, and Jordan was about to go to I think Reebok or something like that. Reebok was pretty big back then. Sure. He was about to go to Reebok.
Adidas probably. Well, the second Jordan wasn't happy with the second Jordan. The second Jordan was all made in Italy, and they got like the guy from Ferrari or something like that to make this Jordan sneaker. Jordan didn't like it. He actually got hurt wearing it, and so he was like ready to leave Nike. Nike brought in Tinker Hatfield to do the Jordan 3, and pretty much the rest is history. Tinker Hatfield is still doing
Yeah.
all the Jordan shoes. Dude is amazing.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I don't know if you've seen it, but I mean, it's a pretty damn good watch. I was like in right when I saw like the Michael Jordan, like that sign and the emblem and everything he does. I mean, that shoe, like there was like a leather shoe that you could wear to as a tuxedo, but then play basketball in. It's so badass. Have you always been a sneakerhead, Seth?
Well, that's the thing is that I come from a family of smart white people, intellectuals, educators, and I wouldn't call us flamboyant with our styles or finances or whatever. And so I've always been surrounded by very rational people who would say, if you have more than two pairs of sneakers that are awesome, in good shape, and basically ready to go, that you're crazy. Like you can't really have more than three, like
One of them has to be a dress shoe.
What's that?
I said one of them has to be at least a church shoe or a dress shoe or something.
Oh no, shoes are a whole other category. But if you you're basically capped at like 2 or 3 pairs of clean, ready to use sneakers. That's just like a financial, like rational decision that you've had to make, tops of 3. And so I've always sort of pushed the boundary. But then when I started writing this book, I realized that I could buy sneakers as research and write those off. So simultaneous with that happening, all the Jordan sneakers from when I was young and couldn't afford them and didn't quite think that they fit in with my game or my style and didn't buy them, these are all being re-released constantly as retros, which the kids love and buy up like there's no tomorrow. But so simultaneously with me sort of opening this door, I became aware that all these sneakers are being re-released. So they're available they're not, I mean, the prices are kind of crazy, but it's retail prices at least. You're not like buying them for $1,000 on eBay from some guy who's had them in his garage since 1990. Simultaneous with that, the sneakerhead thing is like literally a huge phenomenon right now. And in a place like San Francisco or New York City, you see serious game on the streets, people wearing impressive stuff. And so, yeah, sneakerheaddom is real. And now if you get into it, you're encountering people with like upwards of 60 or 100 clean, unworn or barely worn pairs of Jordans, any fancy sneakers that you could just trot out, or they have closet, 60 is not crazy for these people. And so
I know you're a basketball fan, but a couple of years ago, the Spurs signed LaMarcus Aldridge from Portland.
I know.
And when he moved here, they actually made the local news that he was building a smaller house in the backyard of his house just for his sneaker collection because there was no room big enough in the main house.
Oh, if you start going on YouTube and stuff, you can go down like rabbit holes of all these people's different, there's a lot of people's sneaker closets or sneaker vault. And some of them are crazy basketball players or crazy athletes with tons of money. And some of them are sort of normal people. There's this guy in Portland who like owns some chain of like tire shops. And he's got like this sick basement man cave museum quality display thing for all his Jordans. It's crazy. It's mind boggling. But there's also, there's all kinds of crazy stuff online where people are collecting this stuff. It's amazing. It's amazing. And there's online TV shows. And this guy named Babito Garcia, who, when I was really into hip hop in the early 90s, was doing sort of the ultimate hip hop show in New York City with this guy, Stretch Armstrong. They had like all the awesome independent hip hop on their show, and people would come in there and freestyle on the air all the time. And it was just amazing. Like this was the show to listen to nationwide. And so he actually wound up writing a piece for Slam magazine that was called Confessions of a True Sneaker Addict or something like that. And he went on to write a book called Where Did You Get Those, which is all about sort of sneakerhead and sneakerhead stuff and collecting sneakers in New York City when you had to like go all over the city to find specific things that other people couldn't find. And it's just, there's an amazing culture around sneakers. And so really sort of opening myself up to that while I was writing this book as a form of research that I love, it really just sort of energized me to get involved in this project, the Maltese Jordans. It's literally the best thing I've ever written.
It's fantastic. How did you get hooked up with Patreon? Well, tell everybody what Patreon is and then how you got hooked up with it.
Have you had a chance to read the whole manuscript?
I have.
You have?
I have.
Oh, no spoilers. No spoilers. Literally, you're like one of the 5.
Thank you.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, you said it yourself. It's one of the best things you've ever written.
It's the best thing I've ever written.
See? So, in your research of these shoes, what trophy pair of sneakers do you currently own?
They call them grails. There's all this language also that I found out. Like I started going to this sneaker store near me in San Francisco, and at one point this guy, I was buying this pair of sneakers the day that they came out, and I had actually like given up on getting them in the store. So I had bought them online, and then I went into the store anyway just to see them. And because I wear a size 14, they still had that pair and hadn't raffled them off or sold them. And so I was able to like get them in the store and look at them. And I literally was like, kind of wanted to buy them, even though that would end up with me having 2 pairs of these. And this guy was standing there and he's like, well, you could just buy one to, you could just dead stock these and then wear the other ones. And I was like, oh my God, this guy just used dead stock as a verb. I know what he means. And it was just like, it was awesome. I was like, for like a writer word nerd to like get into this whole world of crazy vocabulary and like figure it out. And like, yeah, like, oh, of course. Yeah. I'll just dead stock those. It's like, oh no, he said DS. It's anyway, crazy. It's like, oh, you could just DS that pair. It's like, oh my God, I actually know what that guy's talking about. So the ones that were kind of a grail for me was, so the year 1996-97, this is the first full year that Jordan is back after his first retirement when he had the whole baseball fiasco. He comes back from that retirement partway through the 95-96 season, drops 55 in the Garden, wears 45, and loses to the Orlando Magic in the Eastern Conference Finals in the playoffs, doesn't get to the finals, and he's wearing the Jordan 10s. I think at some point that year in the playoffs, he starts wearing the 11s. But basically, the 96-97 season is when they have Rodman, Pippen, Jordan. 72 wins, best record ever until the Warriors broke it last year. Arguably the best team ever in basketball. That whole season, he wears the Jordan 11s, which to many is the number 1 top best sneaker ever created by Tinker Hatfield and the best Jordan. And so for a long time, my grail, or the thing that I wanted to get, is a high top Jordan 11. I got a low top pretty early on, but when Jordan was playing, they never had the low top. So it took me a while to get a high top Jordan 11. I got one a year ago Christmas, and these were called, I forget what they were called, but they weren't the greatest. They weren't like the greatest for me. It was like a different quality of leather, and underneath the thing that I like about the 11s is that they kind of look like spats, which is like back in the flapper days, the guys would wear like patent leather shoes with sort of paper over them underneath their pants. So it would look like there was patent leather and then this white and then their pants. And so the 11s look like that because they have patent leather around the bottom. Also, the 11s are the sneaker that Allen Iverson wore when he was at Georgetown and he was wearing Nikes, and he's just ridiculous at Georgetown. But anyway, so the high top 11s, there was no low top when Jordan was playing. Now they have low top 11s. I got a pair called the Infrared 23.
The low 11.
The low 11 Infrared 23s. And I was like out to dinner the night that I got them, and I was wearing them. And this waiter who I had like, some guy who I totally doesn't know, he works at the restaurant. It was like very homespun soul food restaurant in downtown San Francisco. And this guy just like walks by our table. He's like, he just said, I like those 11 lows. And this person that I was sitting with had no idea what he was talking about. And I was like, that is sneakerhead knowledge there. And that's why I love this book, because there's like a whole subculture that's very much in your face, but you don't realize it, but it's totally there. So the high top 11s, I got these last Christmas. They came out with the Space Jams, and I got those, which is like a nice, mostly black high top 11 with some blue highlights on them. And these are the ones that Jordan wore in the original Space Jam with Bugs Bunny and all that crap.
I love that movie.
I've never even seen that movie. When it came out, I was like, this is some BS. Now they're remaking it with LeBron. But anyway, yeah, I've never seen it. I think it's probably some BS. But anyway.
That'd be cool as shit if they got Bill Murray again. Yeah, and
I'm
he
sure
did
they
play in the
will. What
band.
else is he? What's he got to do better than that?
He just wanders around and fucking surprises people at their wedding and shit. That guy's weird.
Oh,
I
there's
think
random
I think you
karaoke.
could bank on him showing up in the remake of Space Jam.
Back then, I had a little kid, and it was his favorite movie. So I've actually seen that movie 50 times.
Yeah,
Wow.
that movie's great.
That was the
And I
thing
love
for
the
me,
movie.
is that I was in college then, graduating from college. I was a little bit out of college. I definitely was too cool to go watch a movie with Bugs Bunny. I definitely didn't have a kid that I could take to it. And so I just was wrong age group for that. So the high 11s are my grail. And the shoes that Jordan wore the most that season are red and black high top 11s. And those are called breads for black and red. And those I would like to get. But if I were to try and buy those now, they would cost me like $500. And if I wait, then they'll be re-released at some point in the next number of years in a high, and I'll try and get them then.
I liked those leather ones. Like they had like the red sole. It was like kind of like a see-through sole, and then it was like a black leather across it, and then like red. Like it was red and black. It was fucking badass.
When they re-release them, are they the same quality as the original?
This is a controversial question. Most people would say no. Nike would say that recently, according to Nike, in the last year or so, they started raising the quality of them to get back to the leathers that they were using when they initially released them, which is kind of them saying like, oh yeah, we're now admitting that we've been using crap for these. Probably not, but arguably, according to Nike, yes. But I don't know. They also have like these ones that are premium. I bought this pair of premium Jordan 3s, the Gingers. Those have the gum sole, and those are supposed to be like super fancy leather, and they look amazing. They look like a baseball mitt turned into a Jordan. But I took them to this like shoemaker guy, and I was like, can you just tell me like what's the quality of this leather? Like how much do you think this shoe is worth? And he's like, this is garbage. So that was nice.
But they
The
look
thing-
cool.
They look cool and they're amazing. But the thing about these shoes is that it's kind of like a car. Like as soon as you drive it off the lot, the value of it decreases so much. So you end up with these shoes in boxes that you sort of love, but at any moment you could just decide like, you know what? I'd rather have $200 right now. I'm going to sell this shoe, or I'd rather, $200 to $400. You could just be like, you know what? I'd rather just sell this shoe. And so I've done that. And then I have other ones like these high top 11s where it's like, I love the idea of having them on my feet, but combination of, I don't know if I have a day that's fabulous enough to break them out, or it's like if I just break them out to like go to the park or walk around the block or something, then immediately like the value has plummeted. So there's this whole thing. It's like you end up with these ones and you're like, I don't know if I could wear these.
Sure.
What I do is put them on a shelf, go on Patreon, make a video where they're in the background and people can see them, and then I feel good.
All right, let's get away from sneakers and talk about your writing career and you.
Let's talk about Patreon. I totally blew off that
All right.
question because I was in the sneakers.
Cool, yeah, do it. So what
Sorry.
is Patreon?
But you can see like this is the passion. Like if you follow your passion and write the book that you need to write, it winds up being a better book, but it might not sell or make you money, or I don't know. Young Junius, I think, is the best book that I've published so far, and it's sold less than anything else. But these people in Cambridge are talking about it 40 years later at a cookout. So fucking A, that's good.
Hell yeah.
I'll send those people a free copy.
What?
Shit, yeah.
Well, you can send all of them one free copy to share.
Yeah, I'll do it. So when I started, before I was publishing, I started releasing my stuff as serialized audio as a podcast. And I loved that partly because it enabled me to interact with technology, which it turns out I'm kind of good at, and because it allowed me to connect with readers. And I found out that I'm not the kind of writer who just sort of is good sitting in an ivory tower and only staring at the page all day and not connecting with people. So to put out the audio helped me connect with people across the country and around the globe who liked my stories and wanted more of them. And I really loved that interaction. So I thought that the end game of podcasting was to get published by a big publisher because I wanted to make money off of my writing. And it turns out that big publishers aren't really so good at that all the time. They're not really great at that anymore. So I went that route for a while. I did the thing where I just write the books and put them out in stores. And now essentially Mike Bennett came to me and said, "Hey, I'm doing Patreon, making the podcast and connecting with an audience again. And this is a way that you can monetize it. So you should do Patreon." And I checked it out, and, I did Kickstarter a while back, and that was great, but it's basically a ton of work to just do like one funding moment. It's a lot of work around just like one moment of money. And so the thing about Patreon is that it's subscription based. It allows people to subscribe for the stuff that I'm putting out. It allows me to get back to putting out my audio content. I love that. And I love getting to give people the audio of the Maltese Jordans without even thinking about, where is this going to show up as a book? Who's going to publish this? What form is it going to be in? Blah, blah, blah. What stores? I just, connecting with readers and listeners through the audio. I love that. It's great that we've been able to develop a relationship through that. I'll do your voicemails or whatever you want. Like it's just been really fun to sort of go on that ride and be like, I email you or send you through Patreon something that's like 250 pages, to have the ability to do that and have someone that I've never met out there in San Antonio read it and love it. That's really great as a writer.
Hey, you want to know something funny? You mentioned leaving a voicemail for people.
Yeah.
The password for my voicemail is still 5509 from when I set that password up for you to leave my voicemail back in 09, right before Cinco de Harwood.
Yeah. You realize you have to change that now, right?
Well, no, nobody has my phone number, but
you just said on the podcast. You just said on your podcast the password for your voicemail.
They don't know my phone number. But I mean, it's still, after all these years, it's still 5509.
That's
I was
awesome.
telling my wife that the other day, and it blew me away.
That blows me away. Yeah, 5509. I have these weird little like Twitter avatar pictures that had like a gun and 5509 on them. Yeah.
What's your ATM pin code? No. So my ATM pin code is
So pretty much within a day of this podcast coming out, someone will have hacked your voicemail and left dirty messages.
I'm gonna get my Zipper stolen. Yeah, it's gonna be great. Can't wait. So what led you into writing?
That's a great question. When I was little, I used to play with G.I. Joes, and when I was playing with them, I would be like making up all these stories and like imagining that these stories were playing out. And at the end, I would always be like, I wish I had like written that down or something. Like someone would think that story was really cool. And so I tried to write a couple times when I was really young. And in fourth grade, I wrote this story with this kid who had like a dragon and some knives and swords and stuff. And my teacher wanted to like send it to a magazine to get it published. Like we sent it in and the magazine said it was too violent. And that was my first rejection in fourth grade.
At fourth grade? In fourth grade?
In fourth grade, not only was that my first rejection, but that was the last time that anyone was like, this stuff is great. We should send it out to get it published.
Oh, that's bullshit. Do you still have that letter?
Miss Harper. I don't even think there was a letter. I think there was just like word of mouth that they're like, I don't think so. This was like back in the day when I was like sending them like to send in this story involved me like mailing in the thing that I had written on construction paper or like written on line paper and then bound in construction paper with a cover that I like made by cutting out letters from other colors of construction paper. Yeah, who knows what happened, but it was just like,
oh, did a fourth grader write this? They're like, yeah. Well, now I'm mad. Can you
it might have been fifth grade.
Oh, well, there you go. Can you write out all of the Maltese Jordans on construction paper and send it to me, please?
No, I can't. But what I can do is there are other things that I wrote before the dragon story, even before, it's crazy to trace this stuff all the way back. Like before I could write, I had a babysitter that would like write down the stuff that I would tell her, and we would make books and I would illustrate them. and she would like write down everything that I was saying. And so I have this book that's like Seth and the Monster or something like that I wrote before I could even read. And the babysitter like wrote down the stuff. And that was another construction paper project. Construction paper press was big in my early years. So at a recent point in my life, my parents are basically like, we have to get all your stuff out of our house because we want to move and be flexible, or
Construction paper everywhere.
we just want to empty out our house. So now we're going to start sending all this crap to you. So now like I have these folders that's like, here's the story that I wrote when I was 4. Here's the story that I wrote when, and so now like I have all this stuff masked up, and it's like, to some extent I've always written. Someone gave me a journal early on, and I wrote this whole story about these aliens hiding behind a barn. And I just like, I always thought that writing was really cool. My father was a professor of anthropology, and he had written a couple of books, and I was like, Dad, you should just write mysteries. That would be awesome. Forget about these textbooks or anthropology. You should just write some mysteries. And he never did it. And so I think like on some level, I just wanted to grow up and then do it. And I sort of always thought that this would lead to riches. As like a 43-year-old, I'm now coming to grips with the likelihood that that might not be true.
I don't know, man. You get free trips to Kauai. That's pretty cool.
Free is generous. You're using the word free in a very generous way there. When someone actually pays me to fly to Kauai and says like, oh, we're filming your thing in Kauai and we'd like you to come out, or we would like to give you more than a bus ticket to the town next to you, then well, actually last year, a friend of mine is teaching creative writing at the University of Hawaii, and the University of Hawaii flew me out to do like a guest lecturer thing. So that was pretty effing awesome. They flew me to Hawaii and gave me a stipend for being there for a week. And that was freaking awesome. That was like a highlight of my writing career as well.
That's awesome.
It was crazy because I flew from Boston, and I was so jet lagged the whole time that I was there. Every day I woke up at like 5 a.m. or something and just like stumbled around. I was staying on the campus in this weird campus hotel, and I would wake up and just stumble around campus before anyone else was awake, and then basically drink coffee until it felt like my face was going to melt. And then I would like go back and just hide in my hotel room sleeping until they forced me to come out and talk to students or something.
Wow, sounds like you made the most of it.
It was surreal. Yeah, I totally made the most of that. Yeah, it was awesome. Oh, but no, I did some cool things when I was there. It was good. It was really good. I didn't climb a volcano, but I did do a yoga class. I did a yoga
You
class in
imagine.
Hawaii where I got to hang upside down from the ceiling.
From a volcano? Wow, dude, that's awesome.
Yeah, I was hanging upside down in a volcano doing yoga and riding a hoverboard at the same time.
It was a hot yoga, right? What is it called? Steam? What is it called? Heat yoga?
Bikram. It's called Bikram yoga.
I will solemnly swear that I have never done a Bikram yoga class. The rooms for those
They're
things
cool.
smell terrible.
Yeah.
You go in there
Oh,
and
yeah.
there's some funk.
Fuck working out.
But the Patreon
Oh,
thing is, but so the financial piece is like, the Patreon thing is like, if I can get back to doing the podcast and get the Patreon piece and bring back the listeners that I used to have for the podcast and get them onto Patreon, then I could make Mike Bennett money, and I could, basically fund some more writing projects and some Patreon stuff. So the goal and the plan is to release the Maltese Jordans at a pretty slow pace. I kind of want to speed up the pace, but we should talk about that. I have a question for you. And then I want to roll into releasing as much protein as an egg through Patreon, which I think is a heck of a fun book.
I think that is a fun book. You sent that to me when I was living in Kentucky. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it's good. It's about writing. It's about metafiction. It's about being a dad. It's about copulating. It's about golf. It's good. It's about coffee. It's a good read. I think that's fun. So I'm looking forward to podcasting that. I mean, I'm really excited about podcasting the Maltese Jordans But the thing is, and here's a question for you, Steve. Like back in the day, I was doing an episode a week, and that was hard, but it sort of had this awesome kind of frenetic momentum about it that really pulled me through in kind of a lot of excitement through the book. And I think really pulled in a lot of the listeners and fans as well. Now I'm older, I have a kid, and so I want to do it in a more managed way. And it seems like the audience is willing to go with one episode a month. But I kind of feel like if I could do more than that, it would sort of ramp up the excitement a little bit. What do you think?
I think it would. I don't think every week is necessary. I don't think that's even conceivable with a 4-year-old. But I think you could probably do every 2 weeks. You could probably squeeze that into your schedule. But I do agree that it would ramp up excitement and interest because it's a super exciting story. And even though I read it, I love listening to you read it. And so if I'm going to be honest, it kills me to wait a whole month for the next episode.
It's funny to me though that people are but yeah, so I hear you. And also people are saying like, we sort of expect like once a month now. Like it used to be that Sigler was like pioneering the way and he would never take a week off. And so all of us were like killing ourselves. I think like the advantage of doing once a month is the pace is more manageable, but also it means that with this book that I've already written, I have content for like a year and a half or at least a year. But yeah,
Right.
like I want to ramp up the excitement. Like I want to loop in and get the word of mouth going to make it wider, to pull back in all the folks that that used to be involved. But it's hard. But it's hard. But I also think if I could do like maybe once every 3 weeks or once every 2 to 3 weeks, I could try that.
I'm thinking you do it twice a month, like in the 15th and 1st kind of thing.
If I'm being honest, I don't think I could do that. But even if I did it once every 3 weeks, that's an improvement, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And what if I also integrated in like the new remastered Jack Wakes Up episodes or Triad Deathmatch or In Broad Daylight?
I think that's a great idea. I don't think you should do both of them. I think you should probably only have 2 stories going at once, just so that the listener's not super confused about, wait, which one is this one? What's happening right here?
Well, Triad Deathmatch is only like 5 episodes, so I would just like pop that out. But if I was doing Maltese Jordans and 1 throwback, and I was doing like 3 episodes, say 3 episodes a month or 4 episodes a month of those 2 items, what do you think? Would that be hard to follow?
Only if your throwback is to Jack Palms. Because then we're going to get confused. We're going to be like, wait, I thought he was in San Francisco. Wait, what's happening? But if your throwback is either Disney or in Broad Daylight, I think that's manageable. I'd do Broad Daylight because it's a girl, it's in Alaska, it's wildly different, and so it won't be confusing.
That's interesting. I like that. And so if I'm able to do, let's say if I'm able to do an episode of the Maltese Jordans every 3 weeks, what would you build in terms of In Broad Daylight, in terms of like monthly?
What do you mean? Like how often?
Yeah.
Well, I'm greedy, so I'm thinking as often as your schedule will allow.
But In Broad Daylight isn't a lot of work to put those back out. So like, do you think like 1 a month, right? 2 a month, 1 every 3 weeks? Because I could do this. Like we could flip a switch and I start re-releasing In Broad Daylight Monday or next week or something.
Right.
I've got all the files. They're ready to go. I could start putting them in. But what would be a good pace and what would make sense to make it not confusing?
No more than 2 releases a month, one of each. I think you should just do 1 of each per month, however you want to work that.
I like it.
If you're doing 1 every 3 weeks, then I don't know, do 1 every week and a half or 2 weeks or whatever. But everybody who's on there is just playing hungry hippo, trying to get more content from you. And so I think releasing all the older stuff is a fucking phenomenal idea because, I mean, there's a reason that I've been a fan for all these years, and it's because your writing is really good. It's interesting. It's easy to follow. I mean, you can't put it down. I think it's great. I love it. I was so excited when you decided to do Patreon. And I think that the people that are on there are just greedy for more Harwood words. More hard words.
Thank you. I feel bad that I missed the beginning of August, but I just sort of needed a vacation.
Well, I mean, and the important thing is that you communicated that, you let everybody know, so that everybody just wasn't sitting there going, whatever happened to that one thing that was supposed to happen? Like, you send out a communication, and that's all anybody really wants is to know what's going on.
Yeah. So the other thing
So, I
was,
mean,
when I first came back on Patreon, I was doing Jack Wakes Up and putting those out, but I kind of put it down because I realized, like, if I'm going to put out Jack Wakes Up again and keep it on Patreon or have it on Patreon, I don't want to do it. I want to do it in a better audio quality than what I had before. And so I stopped, and now I've got those remastered, but I could start rolling out in broad daylight. Yeah, like if I did like an episode of Maltese Jordans every 3 weeks and staggered with in broad daylight so that you get 2 episodes every 3 weeks.
I think that's great. And they're completely different stories with completely different characters,
Yeah.
completely different locations. I mean,
Yeah. This is good. You're
Yeah,
helping me figure this out.
they're wildly different content.
Yeah. And I like the idea of doing the short stories, but to be honest with you, well, if I'm going to do the short stories and start re-releasing those, I want to make sure that I have all of those in the audio content quality that I want, and then do it.
Are you talking about Disney?
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're on that, everybody who's listening, the first 3 people who hit me up on Twitter at SteveDave47, I will send the first 3 people to do that an autographed copy of A Long Way from Disney. Autographed by Seth, not by me.
Wow, you have those
So hit me
autographed by me? Wow.
Yes, I do.
Isn't there one of my books
Yeah.
that you have like 10 extra copies of?
I'm pretty good about buying about 10 of all of your books,
I love you.
but I still have left a few copies of Disney, A Long Way from Disney, and a few copies of In Broad Daylight. Everything else I pretty much just have one copy of. Well, I have a couple of copies of Jack, the original Jack Bombs.
Me too. Yeah. Well, that's a great giveaway. I really appreciate that. That's awesome.
Well, my
So
pleasure.
you should give them your Twitter password too while you're at it.
This guy. It's 5509.
It's Alex Hernandez 07.
There it is. Right.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So you're going to give away 3 copies of A Long Way from Disney signed by me to the first 3 people who hit you on Twitter?
Yes.
At Steve Dave
47.
That's awesome. That's really awesome of you. And also I'm doing an interview with Debbie Mack. She's got a podcast thing, and I'm doing an interview with her. And part of the interview for that, I'm giving away the first episode of the Maltese Jordans to some people who write in on that. So anyone who's listening to this podcast now, what do they have to do? At me or message me? They can't message me unless I'm following them, right?
Well, are you on Instagram?
Not really.
Okay, yeah, then they can just at you on Twitter.
Are you stunting on the gram?
Am I what?
Are you stunting on the gram?
Oh, this is more lingo. Yeah, is this sneaker lingo? I don't know what you're talking about.
I think that's what the kids say. Like if you take pictures of your fresh styles and post them on Instagram, it means that you be stunting.
I don't have fresh styles, so I'm out.
Well, if you have a style that appears fresh, or you just want to stunt your styles, whatever they are, you could take a picture and then put that on Instagram and post it. What else do you put on? What do you put on Instagram?
Food. Yeah, it's mostly food. Oh, you? Oh.
Your food stunting.
I put all kinds of things on Instagram. I put yes for suggestions on where to hide things. Yeah. So back to what you were saying. You were saying that anybody who contacts you or hits you up on Twitter at Seth Harwood gets what?
Anyone who hits me up on Twitter from this podcast at Seth Harwood, if you follow me, I will message you a link for you to download the first episode of the Maltese Jordans free from my Dropbox so that you can listen to it and try out the Maltese Jordans free. And if you like it, you can go on Patreon at patreon.com/Seth Harwood and subscribe, and then get all the episodes of the Maltese Jordans and in broad daylight, that Steve and I have just figured out an awesome schedule of distribution for.
What are the different levels on Patreon?
So the basic level is the $3 level. And at the $3 level, you get all the new audio that comes out. So $1 level, I tell you that you're awesome and I pat you on the back figuratively. $3 level, you get all the new audio, and then it goes up from there. The God level is where Steve is at. The $5 level is you get early. No, at $10 you get like the text. So the audio of episode 5 hasn't been released yet, but I have released the text of episode 5. So if you're in at the $10 level, you get the stuff early, and you can submit questions for Q&As. One of these days, I'm going to start these monthly office hours where I talk to people on Zoom for this, kind of like we're doing now. $25, you get to beta read a story or part of a novel once a year, personalized video message. Then there's signed copies at the $40 level. $50, you can study with me and I will read your work to critique it. I teach creative writing online for Harvard and Stanford. So I've got some chops when it comes to teaching ye old creative writing. So if you want me to read your stuff and talk to you about it, you can get in at the higher levels of that. But basically, if you come on Patreon and jump in at the $3 level, $3 a month, you're paying less than a latte and you are really doing something awesome to help support what I'm doing on there. Right now on Patreon, I have 60 people. The number goes up and down a little based on whose credit cards get declined in a given month. But, 60 patrons in the first whatever number of months. I haven't been doing this for a long time. It means a lot to me. I really like it. Great when I see new people coming on there.
So is there a limit to how many papers can be submitted to you in a month's time? Or is it just a sort of, because you said there's a $50, what is it? You pay $50 a month and you do like a proofread of someone's work and then you guys go over it. So is there a limit to how many papers can be submitted to you in a month's time?
You mean like if 100 of your friends like sign up at the $50 level, am I going to start kicking them out?
No, not necessarily. Just from the one person.
Oh, one person, one a month.
One a month. Okay.
Yeah, one person, one a month at the $50 level. Oh, at the $50 level, I do like assignments for people. I sort of like co-opt some of my assignments from Harvard and Stanford, and I give them to you, and you do a 500-word assignment, and then I read those and respond. At $75, it's up to 2,500 words per month.
Like you can write my paper for that, like that kind of thing. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, 100 and up is even more than that. And if I, if I'm doing my editing professionally for this, the hourly rates for these are a bit higher. So, it's kind of a deal. But the thing is, like, there's a sort of a mix between the people who are on Patreon for me are mostly here for the fiction and not for, some of them want to be writers, some of them want the teaching, but a lot of them are here for the fiction. And so the Patreon on that level with the high end stuff is sort of kind of two minds. I want to figure that out and get it straightened out as I go forward. I think the editing stuff is going to kind of yield to some more writing based things. There's a woman on Patreon who really, it makes a lot of sense. Like her thing is set up where like whatever you pay, you get the same thing, but it's like, $3 you're buying her a coffee, $5 you're buying her, $10 you're buying her lunch, $25 you're buying her dinner, $100 you're like paying for a night of her hotel or something, and then sort of like that. What?
Nothing. No, just the way you were explaining it just made me think of something else. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, what do you get for $500 in your mind?
That's where I was going. That's where I was like, what else can you go? Like how high is like too high?
How high does this thing go?
Yeah, I'll send you the link to her Patreon page and you can see. But it's basically like whatever you do, like you are getting the same thing, but like you're sort of giving more. And because ultimately I don't have that many things to offer. One of the cool things was when I did Kickstarter, I offered all these people to have a character in one of my pieces named after them. And then it was great because when I was writing and I had to come up with a new character, I would just go to this Excel spreadsheet and be like, okay, who's up next? Oh, I don't like that name. And just like pick a name that felt good.
No, you're just like, oh right, you're like, I don't like Alex's name.
I'm a jerk cop. Yeah.
I'm gonna get this guy being an asshole. Yeah.
In one of his books, he says one character is talking about.
Oh, you sent me that.
Yeah, I did send you that. I did that to everybody.
That was Everyone Pays, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, these hookers are talking about this dirty cop who's trying to shake them down. And they're like, oh man, that guy, he's the worst. But there was another guy, I felt bad because I named this other character after one of my readers. And then due to changes in the demographics of who I needed that character to be, I then later had to change the name of that character. So it was, I gave and then took away. It was an unfortunate set of circumstances, but I had to be true to something about the city that I was trying to represent with. Well, there was a church, and so I found out that all the people who were priests there mostly were from Korea, and so then I had to change the guy's name. But yeah, so that's how the Patreon works. And if you go on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Seth Harwood, there's a video right there. And if I'm looking at the video in the background right there, when it pops up, I can see all the sneakers that we were talking about at the beginning. You got the ginger 4s right there, the 3s that the guy wanted me to DS one pair of. Then there's the 11s, another pair of 4s, and a pair of all wool 3s, the Muckluck specials.
Did you say all wool?
All wool.
Wood.
There's a pair of sneakers that I've seen that's made out of that like cork that they make cork boards out of, but I didn't buy them.
They have some shoes like that.
I know, I didn't buy them.
Good.
But I don't have any, but I also saw some sneakers that were like made out of, those composition notebooks with the weird black and white cover on them?
Yeah.
They had some sneakers that had that pattern on them, and I liked that. I wanted those.
Like Vans. Don't Vans have that?
No. I don't know.
I think they do.
Look on the internets. But I'm strictly about the but I still have less than 10 pairs, so I maintain that badge of sanity.
So did you or did you not DS that pair?
I did not DS that pair. I stuck with only one pair. The ones that I saw in the store, I did not purchase. I waited for the ones to come in the mail that I had already bought that morning. And to this day, but then, so then I did buy one other pair. There was that pair that came out that was the 7210s. That came out, they were the high top 11s the Christmas before the last one. I bought 2 pairs of those and sold one on Craigslist to a guy who was a checker at Safeway near my house in San Francisco. And this guy already had a pair, and he was going to pay someone to take this second pair and somehow remove the sole and take the white sole and dye it black and then stick it back on, so that he would have a pair that was different than everyone else's.
And also ruin them, but yeah. Well, this guy sounds fiscally irresponsible.
That's a good point.
I mean, it's not like he's a mogul, a media mogul. He's a checker at Safeway, and he must be living with his mom. That sounds like too much loot.
There was another guy that bought this pair of sneakers that I had. So I had this pair that I had actually tried on, and I made the mistake of thinking that if I had tried them on, they were still dead stock because I hadn't really worn them. But I just tried them on in the store, and then I was like, I like these, so I bought them. I got them home, and I was like, I can't have these, so I sold them. And this guy online bought them for $400, decided that they weren't dead stock because he could tell that I had tried them on in the store. And I was like, all right, I'll just buy them back. I'll send you your money. I'll pay for the shipping, all that. And he's like, no, And like in a text message, he said, like, I'm not going to worry about it. The universe got me. He's like, karmically. So basically, he gave them to the Boys and Girls Club. He gave away a $400 pair of sneakers to the Boys and Girls Club. And I was like, well, you know that you could deduct that on your taxes, right? He's like, I'm not going to worry about it. The universe got me.
What the fuck does that mean?
It means karma, baby. And then he showed me a picture of his closet. Do you guys know this Louboutin brand or whatever?
Yeah, they got red soles, right?
They got red soles and they're mostly women, but they have sneakers that cost $1,000, and he had a whole closet full of them. And he had a whole bunch of these Jordan 4s that were like $400. Yeezys, forget about it. There was a pair of Kanye Yeezy Red Octobers, which were like super rare because in between when they made them,
Ugly as shit.
in between when they made them and when they came out, Kanye left Nike. So Nike just like sold off whatever they had in stock in a minute, and then they were gone. And so there was this guy who went to a sneaker conference in New York City. He was like under the age of 20, and he had a pair of signed Yeezys, Red October, in a glass case signed by Kanye. And someone offered him, this was in the New York Times, someone offered him $97,000 for the sneakers, and he didn't sell them.
Was it Yeezy that offered him that money?
No, it was not Yeezy. It was not
That's
actually Yeezy. But yeah, this dude like didn't sell them for $97,000. And for Jordans, like the game, there's a pair of sneakers that he wore in a famous NBA Finals game against the Jazz, known as the flu game. And those just sold out for like 110.
110? No, he had 104 temperature. So he sold it also for $100,000. Oh,
Yeah.
I have a Penny Hardaway shoe that's signed. Is that worth anything? What color is it? Which one is it? It's when he played one. No, it's purple. It's when he played for the Suns. Yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. That's my grail. I want that Penny Hardaway shoe. The black when he played for Magic. Yeah.
Is it game
but
worn?
I just have one. Mine? Yeah.
Who is that, Alex or Steve?
Steve.
Send
It's
me a
just one
picture.
shoe.
It's only one shoe?
Yeah, it's just the left shoe.
That's awesome. How does it smell?
I don't know. I haven't saw it. You liar. It was game worn in a playoff game against the Spurs, in which the Spurs went on to win the championship that year.
How did you end up with that item?
My wife worked at a hospital, and one of her employees was one of Penny Hardaway's old bodyguards. And so when Penny Hardaway came to town to play, we got Penny Hardaway seats. It was when he was with the Heat. But through that guy, I got the shoe, and then I got a Penny Hardaway New York Knicks jersey. Game worn. It's not. It's game worn. And
he was on the Knicks.
Yeah, it was last year. Right? He was on the Knicks. I don't.
Oh my God, you guys are serious Penny Hardaway fans.
No, not at all. He was super cool. And then when I met him, he autographed his. I had bought a Miami Heat hat, and he autographed it. So I have Suns, Knicks, and Heat. Penny Hardaway.
When he autographed the hat, did he let you keep the whole hat, or did he cut it in half? I love the fact that you have one shoe. That's awesome.
Yeah, just one.
There was a thing online that this baseball player came to this basketball camp that one of the guys on the Celtics now was putting on, and the baseball player gave the basketball player a pair of Jordans. That's a nice pair of Jordans that the baseball player signed. Now, why would you ever sign? Like the fact that he is giving him if I'm going to give you a pair of Jordans, probably you might want to wear them, but why would you sign? Anyway, it was super weird. The guy signed this pair of Jordans and then gave them to him. But I want a picture of that one Penny Hardaway that you have. Penny Hardaway sneakers, certain Penny Hardaway sneakers are getting retroed all over the place. Like I would say after Jordan, the Hardaway retros, they're called foam posits. They're like mostly plastic or some sort of weird foam.
Yeah, they're original ones. I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, the kids on the street are crazy about those. The foam posits, the kids like that. That's the number one Penny sneaker. Yeah, send me a picture. I want to see that. I'll post it on Patreon.
All right.
I'll put that on the gram.
Sure, I'll do that.
Yeah, hit the lingo. I love
All right. Well, I'm sure it's really late where you are. It's kind of
Yeah.
late where we are. And
Yeah.
Alex needs to put his to bed.
This is the longest
So-
podcast I've ever done.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, but is that a
That was a compliment. You're
Oh,
welcome.
yeah.
We set a record. Woo!
Yeah,
So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you on
the grams and the
the
tweets,
grams and the tweets and the Facebooks and the .coms
the books
and
of
whatnot.
face?
on Twitter, I'm at Seth Harwood. On Facebook, I am Facebook/Seth Harwood. Or the things that you want are, so the author page is facebook.com/author Seth Harwood. The real website is sethharwood.com. And the main thing that I want everyone to go visit is patreon.com/Seth Harwood. If you hit me on Twitter at Seth Harwood, I will send you the link to the Dropbox thing to download the first episode of the Maltese Jordans. And if you go to sethharwood.com and hang around for a while, the first chapter of the Maltese Jordans will appear there free soon, one of these days.
I like that.
All right, cool.
Well, then, so I'm going to hit you up in just a few minutes.
Fair enough. Tomorrow I will go on Instagram. I will go on, did I say Instagram or Twitter? Just stunt me on the
You said
gram. No, I'm just kidding. Tomorrow I'll go on Twitter, and everyone who's added me with the code hashtag SteveDave47 voicemail password 5509. Hit you right back with the if you actually are not Steve or Alex and you've listened this far through the podcast and you hit me on Twitter at Seth Harwood and give the message Blue Turtle, I will mail you a free book.
Yeah, if you wait till next week, he's going to get a whole bunch of blue turtles. He's like, what the fuck is blue turtle?
Why do fuckers keep texting me like it's blue turtle?
Hey, honey, do you know what blue turtle means?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Blue Turtle hashtag Steve Dave 5509 voicemail. You get the super special secret stopper. All kinds of good stuff happens. Anyway, check me out on Patreon. I'd love to have all you guys, especially Alex, as subscribers. Throw in a few bucks. You'll get the awesome audio, all kinds of good things. And that's where we're going with this. That's the Patreon. Patreon.com/Seth Harwood. Watch the video. Check it out. It's your boy.
Well, thank you so much for. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank
I appreciate it, man.
you. Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. We'll be talking to you soon.
Have a good night, man.
Thanks.
Opening music is the song Magnolia from the 2014 album Intransigence, used with permission from Douglas Miles Clark. Closing music is Apollo from the 2001 album Into the Known by the band Sapphire. Thanks for hanging out with us and getting to know a little bit about our guest. We'll see you next time on Fascination Street.